Welcome back, everybody. This is Jason.
And I am Jeremy.
And we are back here at the music store. We've got a great new interview today. I'm really excited about this one. We had a couple episodes where we were doing our sketchy bits.
Guys who yell at clouds.
Guys that yell. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty excited to not have to listen to myself talk the entire time today. I'm looking forward to take it easy. I brought a ham sandwich. I'm going to eat my ham sandwich and have my coffee while we interview somebody. Just a few things. We are actually doing pretty well on the global front.
Hey.
We are, I don't know if you got the message, but
Finland, right?
Finland. We got Finland. We got Singapore. We got the Philippines. Now this one threw me for a loop. Ethiopia.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine that we would be of much interest in anybody in Ethiopia, but hey.
So it's the same thing in India. Actually, India is rising up as our number 2 and closing versus the United States for listeners. And so I've been doing some research. Apparently, there are lots of countries in the world. This is where I'm going to sound like a stupid American.
God, I must say, the English are certainly,
Please, you don't run into a bit of trouble, what?
I'm really sorry. I'm just trying to get us back to our hotel.
An American.
Yeah, but,
Delighted to meet you.
There are tons of countries where they have different groups of people that have different dialects and different languages, and the one thing that they can agree on is English. So I guess they're wanting to hear what a couple of crazy Yanks like us have to say about rock and roll. So to all of our global listeners, thank you very much. And of course, we love all our local listeners here in Barnegat and Manahawkin and South Jersey. I'm going to let you introduce our guest and get the interview going.
Yeah. So with us today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a wonderful musician and someone who is also entrenched into the arts. So he is able to pull a double whammy here. And this is Mr. Steve Steiner, a man who I've worked with quite a bit. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great, Jeremy. I'm talking to the J-Men.
Yeah. That's right. Actually, at one point, everybody that worked here started with J. So people just come out and say, I talked to some guy, and his name started with a J. It's like, it's one of us.
5 or 6 people here.
Tell us a little bit about Steve.
Yeah, well, I met Steve. Actually, I've learned about Steve through a local regional theater in New Jersey on Long Beach Island called the Surflight Theatre. I believe the very first show that I ever went to go see over there was Tommy. For all those who don't know, the Pinball Wizard comes from Tommy.
The Who.
The Who.
Okay.
And he did his curtain speech, and I said, wow, that guy has a regal speaking voice. My goodness, listen to him talk. And
is it Shakespearean?
Well, you'll hear him. He's when you hear him, you know when you hear him.
All right.
And then I wound up working for him a few years later. He wound up hiring me to do a jukebox musical, one that is very near and dear to his heart, called The Buddy Holly Story. And I'll be honest, I kind of owe a lot of great career choices and a whole longevity of this career of doing 50s music because of the people I met in the production that he hired to make this production happen.
Not to short circuit Steve, but so was he responsible then for what got you going and what became the Buddy Holly gig, an episode that we had with Todd about your life on the cruise ships?
Correct. Todd had worked with Steve before, and he brought the show out to a casino, and that's where we all got a chance to meet. So,
okay, so anybody who's listening, we have a previous episode. I think it's called something Buddy Holly, and it's a great episode if you want to learn about what it's like to be a performer on the high seas. So,
that's right.
But interesting. All the time we're talking, I didn't know that Steve was responsible for that. So, I guess my question is, give us some background on how this came to be your world. What was your background? What is your performance history? How you became he's the director, I guess?
Artistic director. Yeah. I mean, this is what he's doing now. I mean, he has quite a few, his playbill is big.
I'm glad you like my voice, Jeremy. Anyway, enough of that. Yes, I started really, having an incredible appreciation for music as a very, very young person. I had a record player, and I would listen to music for just hours and hours. I played the same things over and over again. And this started when I was maybe 5 or 6. My sister started taking piano lessons when she was maybe 8 or 9. And so I took piano lessons for just a few months. I didn't have patience at the time to practice. and sort of let it go by the wayside. But I still loved music and listened to music a lot. Then when I got into sixth grade, I went to a school that had a good instrumental music program, and I started playing trombone, and I continued to play trombone. And then when I went to high school, I continued to play trombone, but there were some guys forming a band, and I wanted to do that, and I didn't know how to play any of the instruments that were in the band, but they didn't have anybody to play bass. And I said, well, I'll learn how to play bass, and that's how I did it. And I started learning how to play bass. I took lessons again probably 6 times, but then the guys in the band actually got me further than the guy that was teaching me lessons at the music store in suburban St. Louis. I grew up in St. Louis. And so I started really learning how to play, I think, pretty well. Well, Jeremy's heard me.
He's actually Steve is a very good bass player. I've not only have I played with him on a professional level where he has on a show that he created all the arrangements for, and then he also played bass. I did a few gigs with him, and one of them we kicked him a bass solo, and it was a Doobie Brothers tune. I'll never forget it. And man, did he go off.
I'll never be able to do it again. So anyway, then I started really getting interested in music. I was singing in chorus and choir, and by the time I got into high school, I was singing in like the special ensemble of male singers and playing in band. And then I started taking beginning band every year on a different instrument. It was kind of an unusual way, but I was really interested. So I said, well, I play trombone. Why don't I try baritone horn? And it took me, about a week to get through the entire beginning band book. So I said, well, let me do it on trumpet too. So I did baritone and trumpet that year. And the next year I took woodwinds and learned how to play the woodwinds. Meanwhile, I started in high school after learning to play bass. I started learning how to play guitar. But and so that's really where music sort of took me through high school. Meanwhile, I was doing the chorus and the choirs and all that stuff. I started doing the theatrical shows in high school as sophomore, junior, and senior. I did actually, when I was a junior, I was the lead in Carnival. The show we did in sophomore year was Where's Charlie? That's the musical, based on the play Charlie's Aunt. And then senior year was The King and I was not the lead in that one, but I was one of the supporting characters. And so I went to school. I graduated from high school, actually, in 1969, at the height of the Vietnam War. And our year was actually the last year that you could get a draft deferment to go to school. After that, they stopped having draft deferments. And I have the greatest respect for anybody that's ever served in the armed services, but I have to say that at the time, going to Vietnam did not seem very appealing to me. And so I'm going to school, and I'm going to study music because I think I can stay in school if I study music. I started as a trombone major, and then my choir director convinced me that my second semester I should become a voice major. So I did. I moved from trombone to voice, and then I decided I was going to take a double major in music. So I was a voice performance major, which is like, in those days, was sort of like an opera track. I also was instrumental education, which is as far from voice performance as you can possibly be. So it's quite different than a voice performance track. So that was what I studied in college. Meanwhile, I was in, I guess my sophomore year of college, the Six Flags amusement park outside of St. Louis was opening, and they auditioned. They hired, I think, like 16 from my college. It's not called Webster University. It's in suburban St. Louis. And so I went to work at the Six Flags park, but also was playing gigs when I wasn't in the show at the Six Flags park. And I did that for 2 years. I guess it was around Christmas of when I was going to finish my senior year in June. I went out to see a club band, and I had a band that was playing clubs to a degree. They were called the Young Californians. I remember it well, and I got to talking with the guy that was their music arranger, a fellow by the name of Al Walker, who's no longer with us, but he he kept my information. And then when that band broke up, it was like right as I was graduating from college. And he asked me if I'd be interested in coming to California and rehearsing a new band. So I went to California and rehearsed a new band. And I was the bass player for this band. It was a close harmony vocal group, because that's the kind of stuff that Al used to write. And he had me singing the top parts because I had control vocally, because I was the only one that had ever had any voice lessons. But because I had control of my falsetto, he wrote me on the top parts, despite the fact that my actual singing voice is like lower than the basement. So
I was wondering about that.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I got into that. And then after that, when that band broke up, I went back to St. Louis and took what I learned from Al and that experience with him and put my own touring band together. And we did that for like 5 years, playing clubs all over the country. I'm very fortunate. By the time that I was finished with doing that, I had actually been in 48 of the 50 states. And I have since been to the other two, which oddly enough were Maine and Idaho.
What year? What time period? What years were these?
That was when I was touring with my band. It started in 74, and we did that until 1978.
I have a feeling, and I could be very wrong, but that the heyday of being a musician in a band and playing the States and going around and entertaining and stuff was probably peaked about the end of the 70s.
I would say so. Yeah.
Now, that's my blanket statement, but I just feel like after that, it got disco came in, then DJs came in.
I think DJs is what is that final nail in the coffin.
Yeah, but like I feel like the 70s is when, man, like you could be like a guy that was a working musician. And I feel like that also is what set up all the college programs that like you and I went to college for. Like, oh yeah, no, these were all established in the 70s. And sure, you can be a working musician and travel around and make a decent living and have a nuclear family.
North Texas State. Holy cow, the program down at North Texas State. 1 o'clock band, 2 o'clock band, 3 o'clock band. That's you.
I was at 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock band. There you are.
I was at 2 o'clock band.
Jason likes to sleep in.
Yeah, that was 2 p.m., not 2 a.m. Yeah, North Texas is great. That's a whole other show and a whole other conversation about music school. But so I feel like that's really cool. Anybody who is out there like just killing it in the 70s.
Well, for those listening, for those of you who happen to play an instrument, if you ever get a look at an instrument that's been played, you'll know it versus an instrument that sat under a bed. And I've seen Steve's bass. And
don't embarrass the man.
It is no. That's a badge of honor right there. The miles that he put on that instrument. And one of the most interesting things about it, if you flip the bass over, he had put a set list on the back of the bass.
Genius.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, that's not a set list because you can't read it. You know what it is? It was to keep my belt buckle from scratching the bass.
Yeah, very nice, very cool instrument. So now you're at this point. We're into the tail end of the 70s. So, at what point did you decide to? And is there someone that you could credit or make note of that said, "Hey, why don't you make a move into theater?" Like, how did that transition happen?
The transition happened is that I had gotten married. Despite the fact that I had gotten married while doing this job, she was pretty convinced that she was going to be able to talk me out of it after a while. And we had a child, my son, Simon. And so when the band was going to break up, I was going to put it back together again with new people. And she convinced me to try to go back to, have a real job. And so I did. I went back. We moved back to St. Louis. We bought a house, got a real job working for a paint manufacturing company. And so there we are. I'm working, and the marriage did not work out despite the fact that I had a real job. So that obviously wasn't the problem. I started doing theater avocationally at a community theater in suburban St. Louis in Kirkwood, where our house was. It was the Kirkwood Theater Guild. And then I started doing it kind of all over the area. I did shows kind of in several different places, all community theater. In other words, for free. It was a hobby. You rehearsed after work in the evenings, and usually after dinner, like 7 to 10. And you rehearsed for a long period of time, and then did the show maybe 4 or 5 times. One of the directors of a very good show, a production cabaret that we did, was going to audition along with some other people at a new professional theater, and it was called Summer Stage. And so I said, yeah, all right, I'll go. And I went, and a few weeks later, I think they lost somebody, and they called me, of all the people, probably because of not my acting ability, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing in those days. But it was a production of 1776, and I think they needed a strong singer in the ensemble, so I played a guy the guy from New Hampshire, Bartlett. So he called me, and I figured out a way to make that work within my schedule. And then I was off and running and starting to do pro things. Then the big pro theater in St. Louis was holding auditions, and all of these people that I had been doing community theater with were going down to audition for the Muni. Now, the Muni in St. Louis is a big outdoor theater with 11,600 seats. It's really big. It's a 110-foot proscenium with a 90-foot revolve, and it's huge. And I got a call, and all of a sudden, I was in Carnival, which is a show that I did in high school. And there are 4 puppets. There are four voices. There's a little boy, a diva opera singer, a walrus who's just dumb and sweet as can be, and a fox who's kind of tricky and evil. And so I did them voices for them, and I ended up doing them in that production. And then that production moved out of town to Atlanta, and all of a sudden now I'm a professional actor.
Sample of the voices? Yeah.
Oh, the walrus is pretty dumb. The fox is pretty sly, and he talks a little like this.
Okay. And the diva.
Ooh, well, she's falsetto, and I don't have that at my age anymore.
So now you have these. They hired you for the job. You did it, and now you're a professional working at the Muni.
Yeah, and then I worked for the Muni again the next year, and I did some other work at another professional theater, and I had my union card. And then so I decided in 1982 that I was going to move to New York. Was going on a try. I had seen a lot of theater, and I'd seen a lot of touring shows. And I saw who was coming through in the touring shows, and I thought, I think I can do that. And for 5 years, I worked very consistently, 45 weeks a year, 100% out of town. I would go here, and then I'd come back and audition, go here. I did a couple of national tours, which was very fortunate. So now, all of a sudden, I'm working professionally, and finally auditioned and got a Broadway show. It was different because I had been doing mostly leads and large supporting jobs. Although for Little Shop of Horrors, I was the understudy. So I understudied the voice of the plant, and the character that's in the program is titled Orrin Bernstein, Snip Loose, and Everyone Else, and he plays like 7 characters. It's a fun part. And then the Anything Goes happened in 1987, and I was in that show all the way through the run through 1989 when it closed. So we did over 800 performances of that show. And then I worked out of town again, did a production of Camelot, and then the Buddy Holly story auditioned in New York, and I got that. And so I did the Buddy Holly story both out of town, pre-Broadway, and Broadway. So that was well over a year of it. I auditioned for a piece called Return to the Forbidden Planet.
3, 2, 1.
Ignition!
Which is based on the movie Forbidden Planet, which itself is based on The Tempest of Shakespeare, except it's made to be about this space travel and this and what have you. And if you're smart about Shakespeare, which I'm not all that smart, but if you're smart about Shakespeare, you can actually go, oh, that's from Romeo and Juliet. In 1990. that beat Miss Saigon for Best Musical at the awards in England, in London. And both Buddy Holly and Return to the Forbidden Planet required actors who played music. So that helped me to get into those shows. Return to the Forbidden Planet, I played 5 instruments and played Dr. Prospero, but it was all 50s and 60s rock and roll, and it was billed as Shakespeare's forgotten rock and roll masterpiece. And the Buddy Holly story, again, I was playing 5 instruments for that one.
Well, that's good because as a there are people who definitely can say that they're an actor-musician, meaning that they can act like a musician, but it's always good in the birth of all these jukebox musicals that have seemed to be coming out in the last 40 years to 30 years. You are an actual instrumentalist, so this is yet another realm of when learning an instrument, you can step into it. It's like, what can I do if I could step into the role of they're always needed.
Well, I have a question on that. When you do all these historical revival kind of shows, Jersey Boys and all that kind of thing, although that one's more vocal, do they say, I'm going to go get a musicians and that sound and look and can play like somebody, and then we're going to mush them in as actors to be able to perform it? Or do they go say, let's get the actors, and then we're going to try to train them enough that they can then pull this off?
Usually they ask first for actors who already know how to play. So people that are pursuing an acting career as opposed to a musician who maybe has never tried to act before. But usually they're looking for actors first unless the role is really a ringer. It's really a musician that might have a few lines. When doing theater, the most important thing is it needs to ring truthful.
How do you end up then spearheading a community theater down the Jersey Shore? How did that come about?
It's a professional theater. The term community theater really means is that it's an amateur theater. It's people doing it for the love of it, but we all of our actors are paid. And in fact, of the regional theaters in New Jersey, there are now 42 regional theaters of varying sizes. We're the 5th largest, both in terms of audience as well as budget.
Make sure I understood and heard that correctly. There are over 40 theaters in New Jersey where people are being paid to do their art. That's pretty amazing. I never would have guessed that. We always do a lot of guess how many kind of thing.
Yeah.
I would have thought like 10.
How'd you get here?
I got a tour that came into Broadway, and that was State Fair in 1996. And after that finished, I auditioned some more, and I auditioned for the new production of Cabaret. And realized that wasn't sure I wanted to continue doing that. And I had started directing in the city, so I directed a couple of shows.
How'd you get to New Jersey after you directed? So now you're...
Well, after directing a few shows and not sure I wanted to continue to put myself through the audition process that I had for Cabaret. And so I started applying for positions, and this one was advertising in October of 1997, I think it was. The idea was to do the shows and do the season. I helped pick the season in February because I was hired, I guess, in December, and I came down in February. But the idea was kind of to let it operate the way it was operating. It was actually a for-profit organization in those days. Then it became obvious that the guy that hired me would love to sell it, but nobody wants to buy a theater. And I said, well, a nonprofit organization might be interested in buying it. He says, okay, find me one. So there was a Friends of organization here that, raised money to help the intern program. I mean, they raised about $10,000 a year. I got together with them, and we created a plan along with the Economic Development Authority to do tax-exempt bonds to allow people to invest. And I got, in those days, it was Commerce Bank. Now it's TD Bank. But Commerce Bank bought about half of the bonds, and the people that owned it took back the other half because they were going to make a nice tax-exempt interest on it. And it became a nonprofit organization in 2001.
What advice do you have to anybody that would want to live your life?
Be the best that you can be. You know, that means having more patience than I did when I decided that I didn't want to take piano lessons, and continue to study and continue to learn. I went back to school, and so I got about a year's worth of credits toward a master's in acting, because I thought, if I'm going to do this, I really better not just fly by the seat of my pants. I better learn what technique is. I still continue to learn, which is why I try to attend. I don't just go to theater once in a while. I go a lot. And I see, for 10 years, I was a Tony voter. So I got to see absolutely everything that came on Broadway. And that was great. But I continue to do that as much as I can, or as much as I can afford it, and try to see things. I've seen most of the ones that are nominated for Tonys. So you have to invest in your art, both with time and with money. Let's face it, how much equipment does every musician you know have?
Oh my gosh.
We're literally doing this show from basically in the middle of a warehouse room. It's just, I'm staring at a stack of cymbals and boxes of amps. It's just ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell this quick story. My introduction to meeting Steve, and this was great. He hires me for a production of the Buddy Holly story. I went to his house, and he has a music stand for me and some music, and I bring my guitar, I bring an amplifier, and he goes, "Oh, hold on 1 second. Let me get my bass so I can play with you." Well, just like we have lots of equipment, he has, you name it, in that garage for his shows. Bins and Rubbermaids, and it's like a labyrinth of all this stuff. He disappears into the abyss of his garage behind a pile of Rubbermaids. And he's just I hear some rustling, I hear some movement, and all of a sudden, I hear a crash. I'm like, oh my goodness. And I see some Rubbermaids tip over. And then all of a sudden, Steve emerges from the rubble. But before I see Steve, I just see a hand and the bass.
I got it!
And he just exclaims, I found it. And he walks out. I'm okay. And he has the bass that we were talking about from all those years ago in question. And he plugs it in, and he looks at me, and he plays it and goes,
did he even tune it?
He goes, it's still in tune.
Oh, it's still in tune. Oh, okay.
That bass holds tune really well.
Well, yeah, I should say so.
I think we did great.
Steve, thank you for being with us today.
Steve, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. Hopefully you've inspired some people.
It's a bit of a crazy story with a lot of bends and turns, but and there's more to it, but that's most of the high points.
There we go.
Well, I think that sounds like an invite to come back.
That's right. We'll finish it up. So I want to just...
anytime you want.
Yeah, I want to plug, ladies and gentlemen, if you're in the area and you're looking for some good theater, or maybe you want to catch a concert, please make sure you check out not just any of the theaters here in New Jersey, but make sure you check out the Surflight Theatre in Beach Haven, New Jersey.
The URL?
It's surflight.org.
Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you, J-Man.
All right. You have a good one, Steve. Take care.
Thanks a lot.